Hello, this is Dan Ferrisi, Editor-in-Chief with Commercial Integrator, welcoming you to AV Plus, the podcast for the commercial AV integration industry. I'm really excited for this week's podcast because we're joined by several members of the Control Concepts Brain Trust to talk about InfoComm 2022 and their unique perspectives about the show. In particular, we're joined by President and CEO Steve Greenblatt, Account Manager Brittney DiCesare, and Marketing Specialist Emily Rocha. It'll be a great conversation all about InfoComm 2022 and their unique insights into it. Once again, welcome to AV Plus and enjoy this week's episode. As always, please like and subscribe to our YouTube page, and please subscribe to the AV Plus podcast on Apple and on Spotify. So happy to be joined today by the entire Control Concepts brain trust, so to speak, at InfoComm 2022. Steve Greenblatt, President and CEO. Brittney DiCesare, Account Manager. Emily Rocha, Marketing Specialist. I saw all three of you at the InfoComm show floor, and I know you're only a portion of the 11 people who work for Control Concepts, but you were omnipresent at InfoComm, so I couldn't think of a better trio of people to ask about the InfoComm 2022 experience. And also just, your various levels of, having been to so many different shows. In your case, Steve, I know this was your first show ever. Emily and Brittney, I believe this was your second in-person InfoComm, your first in-person InfoComm, not being part of the Avixa organization. So really exciting time and a really exciting show, and I can't wait to get all of your perspectives. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
A pleasure to be here.
So let's start with the sense of community that we all get when we go to a show like InfoComm. I think we're all very much active in the AV Tweeps community on Twitter and on LinkedIn. And it really seemed, perhaps more than any show I've ever been to before, that InfoComm 2022 was a place of real community, of friendship, of kinship, getting together and just being overjoyed to spend time with each other, not virtually, not just on Twitter, but in person. Can each of you in your own way give a sense of community that you got from the show?
So I think for me, the community at the show was number one. Usually the show is about, seller to buyer, making new relationships, finding new products and technology. I think this year, out of years past, it was about connecting with all the people that you got to know during the pandemic through the various social media platforms. So the sense of community, although the numbers and attendance were down from years past, the energy everywhere within the convention center was just incredibly palpable. Everyone was just so thrilled to be back together again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Brittney. As a first timer, I got to see all these people that I have connected before on Twitter, or clients that we have been talking through emails or video calls. And in an event with almost 20,000 people attendees, it felt like everybody knew each other, which was, great. Everybody was so friendly and supportive. I felt really welcomed and a part of the industry as well.
Knowing that it was your first in-person InfoComm, Emily, and it was also the first in-person InfoComm for my associate editor, Emily Rocha, she had much the same impression that you did, that people were just incredibly welcoming. I know that the AV Tweeps community online is very welcoming. It's always like kind of free-for-all, hop on in, be part of the conversation. People will happily engage with you and amplify your thoughts. And it really seems like that translates to in-person very, very smoothly. That possibility of awkwardness, or I don't really know you, do you want to talk to me? It just didn't seem to exist. I know that's what Amala told me, and it seems like that was the case for you as well.
Yes, exactly. Same thing, everybody was really, really supportive and friendly. It's like you were there since forever. And it was great to meet everybody in person.
Well, Steve, you and I are more of the gray beards of the industry. We've been here for a long time. Our InfoComms are measured almost in 2 decades, probably at this point. So what was your thought, having been to so many?
I don't disagree with all of the consensus that that it was about community and about people, but I've always thought that. I take the approach, and maybe it's our unique perspective on the industry, that we go there because everybody else is going there, and it's as much about the attendees as it is the exhibitors. So having the conversations that you can't have on calls, and also being able to see people in a different element and be able to connect on more of a human level rather than a technology level has always been key. Being able to realize that the person that you're dealing with is just like you, or maybe even find out what are some of the things that you both enjoy, and it just strengthens that bond. And I feel video calling has certainly been an advancement for us over audio calling, because you get to see the person is a real person. But when you get to meet somebody face to face, it really takes it to the next level. The other thing that I found too is that a lot of people are not as they don't have the same level of small talk, or aren't as forthcoming maybe with feedback or insight that they would be when you see them in person. So that we got a lot of people coming up to us to tell us, hey, thank you for helping us on this project, or it was so great working with you, or your team has done something that really made our life easier. So those types of things you are more you see more often when you can meet somebody in person than other medium for communication.
I totally agree. I mean, as good as these kind of virtual meetings, even like we're doing now, are, those conversations that are had face to face are just not replicable at this point, at least, in any virtual format. And there are conversations that might be had, things that might be said that would not be said if it weren't for that in-person meeting. And I think InfoComm is absolutely indispensable for that. And as you say, it's not just about the technology, although that's important. It's really the human-to-human connection, the human-to-human relationships. But let's talk about technology at least a little bit. I would like your respective opinions on whether what you saw on display in the West Hall and the North Hall, whether you assessed it to be kind of revolutionary, if you saw anything that really knocked your socks off, or whether you think it was more of an evolutionary show with continued refinement of what you already kind of were familiar with.
So our perspective is a little different also, and I probably will say this a lot than most, because we live in the software world, so it's really hard to put that on display a lot of times. But we did see a lot of advancement in being more open-minded, being more looking at how we can take what we have in a product and do more with it. So I do think that there were some big steps taken in that area. I mean, we've seen this before, but some years we've also seen systems become more closed, wanting to have more of the pie, if not the whole pie, versus being open to how do I work with different partners, other products? How can I take the product that I've built and make it into more than what it was originally? Additionally, too, some products would become more capable by having software upgrades. So those are two areas that I think we saw some big advancements, and I think we will continue to, which is a great sign for our industry.
Anything you might want to add to that, either Emily or Brittney, in terms of your assessment on a top line level of the revolutionary or evolutionary or enhanced nature of what you saw?
Yeah, I think, with what Steve said, software is becoming so important to evolve your products, to make them work across the different platforms, to make them work across the different areas that are needed, especially with any supply chain demands and lack of product in some cases. And so it's so important to be able to have something that easily works, that's easily programmable. And we talk and we hear a lot about these plug and play solutions, but that doesn't happen without hard work and hard development on the other side. So someone has to be developing that code. Someone has to be doing the hard work and the heavy lift to be able to make it easy on the end side.
What about you, Emily? I know this was your first InfoComm, so you can't necessarily say, oh, in InfoComm 2016, it was like this, but you have been in the, part of Control Concepts for several months now, and obviously you're right enmeshed in the industry along with Brittney and Steve and the entire Control Concepts team. When you saw what you saw at InfoComm, whether it was software or hardware you happened to see on the show floor, what was your assessment? Were you kind of knocked back by what you saw, or was it kind of a piece with what you were familiar with prior to the show?
Yeah, so I think Stephen and Brittney, they resumed very well the same opinion I have. I think what was greater for me being new to the industry was just seeing like the extensive market that there is in the AV industry. It's many pieces that needs to be connected to make it great, like we see in final projects. So it was great to see the variety of different markets that makes the AV industry to me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, during my previous time with Sound and Communications, that's kind of the heart of what we focused on. We would talk about a project and we'd run the equipment list with 250 or 300 line items because none of those individual components was delivering the solution. It was the integration of all of the components to create a cohesive system that created the solution. And I think a show like InfoComm reminds us of that nothing can be looked at in a vacuum. All of it has to be looked at as part of an integrated, cohesive whole. So let's continue on with, just picking up a little bit about what we were talking about earlier with the sense of community. I think all of you would agree that in-person trade shows still have value because all of you seem to think that the conversations in the community, as we discussed, are absolutely essential. But, post-pandemic, there are still concerns about people gathering together in very large groups in some cases. Do you feel like trade shows on a large scale, tens of thousands of people, maybe over 100,000 people in some cases, are they still what you are looking for as an organization? Are they what the industry should be looking for? Are more localized, more regionalized shows of greater value? What is your collective assessment as far as trade shows and expositions in the future? And I believe at least some of the team was just at the Simco event, if I'm not mistaken. That would be more of a smaller, more regional kind of an exposition or a show. Where do you see the future lying? Where do you think you get the most value?
Well, I think InfoComm 22 answered the question, if there ever was one, as to if there's value in trade shows. I think it was so clear and evident that being in person, there's no way to replicate that on the same level without being in person. And so I think people need to make the best decision for themselves, keeping their personal health in mind. And, for me, I wouldn't have traded not going for me. And I'm not in a place where I have to be careful in what I'm exposed to. And so I know there are others who are, but I wouldn't have traded $1 million to not go to InfoComm. It's the one place where everyone's together. And so the more regionalized shows or expositions are, it's still important and there's still a lot of value there. And I think those scattered throughout the year are great, but having everyone in the same hall, all together in the same place, in the same hotel, sitting at the same lobby bar, there's no way to be able to trade the conversations that happen organically and naturally.
100%. Do both of you agree, Steve, Emily?
Yes, definitely. I would call InfoComm like a AV school in 4 days, an intensive AV school. It's just amazing to see all the technology together, everything in one place. And like, as a marketing perspective, like the opportunities these companies have to provide an experience to their leads, to their clients, and raise brand awareness, all in one place, it's invaluable. It's an investment that is definitely worth investing in. Can be a game changer to someone new like me.
And Steve, yeah, I was just going to say, having come back from Simco, what is your assessment of large scale, small scale, the balance of both?
I was going to kind of reflect back, probably say 10 years ago, when teams used to bring a lot more of their technical staff. You would see some companies that travel in droves, where they would be wearing the same shirts and they would all be in the same booth together, and it would be like an army of people. And unfortunately, we don't have those same days, and we've seen a different approach or a strategy change in some companies for one reason or another. Granted, it is a large cost, and it's also a large both monetary cost and time cost to do something like that. So having the local shows is important for those folks. The ones that won't be as comfortable or won't find their same place in a large show. And we do have an industry of a lot of more, but there's a balance, but I would say we're probably weighted to more introverts, where they're not going to get the same experience at a large show. They may get overwhelmed, or they may just not be able to take as much advantage as they could having that small setting environment. So I will think that the smaller shows will never go away, but we need to have the large show to be able to bring the whole community together. It's just essential. I think it's who we are. And I can't think of another industry where you can have people that just start out and really are able to fit in the community so quickly. And then I think that that's a testament to having an event like this, because it would really be hard to do just at your desk. So you have to bring everybody together to be able to build those relationships and bonds. And lastly, it's just I try to bring the analogy of the amount of business you can do in that week is probably equivalent to months worth of calls that you would try to make.
Absolutely. And just talking about that welcoming nature of our industry, a lot of talk has been going on lately, deservedly so, about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, trying to bring more diversity to our industry, which is a very, very laudable goal. In terms of belonging, though, I think that's one thing that we do pretty well. We make people feel like they belong. When people are new to the industry, when people come to the tweet ups, I never get the sense that anyone is standoffish. I don't get the sense that we're a cliquish industry. So as much as it's incumbent on us to diversify, bring in more women, bring in more people of color, bring in more youths, it is nice to see that by and large, it seems like there's a real sense of belonging, a real sense of community, a real sense of come be part of us, come be part of the AV Tweeps, come be part of the Tweet Up, come be part of our friendship and our family, AV in the AM. And I think that's a heartening thing, because it's very easy when we're such a tight-knit community to be a little bit cliquish, and I don't get the sense that we are. So I think that's to our collective credit, even though the imperative to diversify continues unabated. When you look at InfoComm, I want to ask a couple of questions. Were there any things that surprised you positively about the show? And are there any things that you think could be improved? I mean, we're definitely not looking to bash anything. It was a very successful show, but do you have any constructive criticism? Anything where you feel like for 23, for 24, they could do even better?
I could jump in. So I'm not of the type that is going to really think negatively, because I think we had such a great experience. So not everything has drawbacks. Everything has things that didn't go well. Everything has something that you didn't like. My biggest challenge in a show that's in Las Vegas is all of the distraction. I like when we could all be together and we know where everybody is, and we're all, that you don't have that many places to look, and you're not competing with other means of entertainment, and we're a little bit more enclosed. So I prefer an Orlando show or a show like that where there's more togetherness. As much as we all talk about the distance between the halls, if you planned your your show well, you really didn't encounter that as much. But there's always so much walking in Las Vegas. Everything, as they say, is always looks closer than it really is. So it's to be expected. And if you're not prepared to walk at an InfoComm, then you came to the wrong place. so I think I think it was a wonderful show, and there were some things that didn't happen at this show that hopefully will be back in future shows, like awards and other get-togethers and gatherings. And it's probably because it was a bit of a transitional year, but I only can see things going up from here.
Brittney, Emily, anything that surprised you on the positive or the negative?
Yeah, so I'm going to agree with Steve. Vegas is not my favorite place. And I think, we're probably the group that's in the minority that prefers the Orlando show for a couple of reasons. We're all together. We're all in one place. It's easier to get around. And most of the events are within, a few hubs. It's not, on the other side of Vegas where it looks close, but takes nearly an hour to get to it. I think in looking at planning for InfoComm 23, I'd encourage, as you're looking at planning, events or receptions, take a look at the whole week. We had a lot of events scheduled on one evening, and we did our best to make an appearance, but you can't get the full excitement, and you can't fully enjoy the reception when you're kind of bouncing around. So, I'd encourage everyone to kind of look at different days other than, day one evening, which seemed to be the popular one for this year. And like Steve said, I think it was that transitional year, and there were a lot of, I would imagine, receptions that got planned last minute as we were waiting to see how ISE went off, as we were waiting to see the expected attendance numbers and excitement for InfoComm 22. So definitely looking forward to next year. Again, it's Orlando. So although the humidity is not the best, the rest of the show, like I said, is just probably my favorite place.
Right.
Yeah, I completely agree with Brittney. Plan ahead is definitely one of the key elements to making InfoComm successful. Like the way we plan to stay in one hall in a day, and then in the West Hall in the other day, worked really well, and we took the most out of it. But one thing that stood out to me was that most of the people I met, I keep hearing since I started at Control Concepts, I heard that, once you get in the AV industry, you're not leaving it. And I was so surprised to see how that statement is true. Most of the people I met were shared with me how they started in a role and went to another role, but still remaining in the industry. And that just gave me proof that, it's a great place to be. And it's worth the investment.
Right. So we were talking a bit about community. We were talking a bit about the sense of belonging that people have when they go to a show like InfoComm. And I was mentioning in that context, diversity, equity, and inclusion, the need to diversify our industry. I think it's heartening to see on a podcast like this that there's actually diversity in this group. 15 years ago, people talking about InfoComm, it almost invariably probably would have been 3 or 4 white men. So it's nice to see diversity in action. But I'm curious, from each of your perspectives, do you feel like AVIXA as an organization, InfoComm as a show, commercial AV as an industry is doing enough to diversify our ranks, to bring in younger people? A lot of people are spending a lot of time talking about a lack of qualified, certified talent, not having a pipeline into our industry. What is your sense of how we can build a pipeline into our industry, attract people to commercial AV, and not just attract people, but also attract people that are going to make our industry look more like the society within which it exists and that it serves?
Yeah. I think AVIXA, having worked there and helping, I got to help our Women's Council and our Diversity Council. So I got to work alongside the leadership there. So I know AVIXA is working towards that. And although we are diversifying, it's not going to be fast enough. I mean, unless you snap your fingers and all of a sudden there's equality there, we can always do more and do better. I think if you weren't at the women's breakfast, you know, we heard that the gender equality, there's still a lot of room for growth there. And I think we're now at about 14% female within our industry. And so we can definitely do better there. And I think it's going to take, you know, us continuing to look at ways to make it more inviting for women. There's different ways. Steve and I were talking about this, you know, phrasing your job descriptions a certain way. Most women, unless they feel nearly 100% that they can do the role, so they look at every single thing on that job description, say, yes, I can almost 100% do all of this. Most women will feel unqualified for the position. On the other side, most of the time, men will look at it, and if they can do 20% of the 100 things listed, they're like, oh yeah, I'm good. I can do this. Definitely. I might even be overqualified. And so that's a difference in thinking and how we, you know, self-evaluate. And so being mindful of how you're preparing those job descriptions, in terms of, you know, racial equality across our industry, there's still so much room for growth. And what it's going to take is all of us coming together, understanding that we're better together. That difference of thought and that difference of opinion and ideas is what makes us a thriving community. If we were all the exact same person, it would be, I'll speak for myself. If we were all Brittnys, it would be a really boring community. I'll tell you that. And so, you know, I think we have to kind of stand up, and when we see something, kind of question that. If we are a part of a panel or a part of a discussion and we feel like it's not appropriately diverse in thought, in color, in looks, and gender, ask, like, stand up and say, you know, is there someone else we could bring into this conversation? Is there someone that could be here instead of me that might be better suited to give us some diversity here? Another thing, and sorry, this is kind of like my hot button topic. I love talking about it, so stop me. But, you know, another thing is men have to help too. When it comes to gender equality, I'm raising 2 white men. I have an 8-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I can't change their race. I can't change their genetics, but I can raise them to support other women. I can raise them to support diversity in all aspects. And so I think, you know, my hope for them and my hope for the men in our industry right now is to be the ones supporting that. You know, men have the majority in this industry, and nothing's going to happen without that support. So, you know, being at the breakfast, encouraging your female team members to go to the breakfast, encouraging them to get involved in the AVIXA Women's Council, the AVIXA Diversity Council, just encouraging them to stand up, to be bold, and to be the ones out there, you know, furthering the cause. I think it's going to take all of us working together to be able to do that.
Thank you so much, Brittney, for those thoughtful comments. I mean, people like you, people like Corey Schaefer, people like Brandy Alvarado Miranda, people like Tammy Fuqua are pointing the way to a better future. And I appreciate all of your passion and you're just an incredible way of explaining the stakes and explaining the importance of making our industry more inclusive and more representative of the society that we serve. I mean, we are in the experience creation business, and we want to create experiences for all people, not just for, you know, the 86% of people in our industry who are men. So it's really, really important, and I appreciate the leadership of you and your colleagues. So Emily, Steve, what are your thoughts?
I think Brittney said everything. Yeah, I agree that, you know, we got to bring more awareness to the diversity issues we have. You know, I was at the Women's Council breakfast that I was aware that we are only 14% of the AV industry. And that's a really, really low number. And we need everybody's support, not only women, not only the 14% supporting more women to get in, but like the whole community, you know. And we need more actions like this, and we have the councils to support this, and we need to get more involved.
I'll kind of also add on to that too. I mean, you mentioned about younger people. You know, it's just so important in order for this industry to live on, that we leave a legacy and we invest in people to take the reins and take over and pass the baton, so that we do have an industry to look back to. And I think at some point in my career, and I still have in my mind the long way to go, but I want to invest in others, because it's so fulfilling to be able to share what you've learned, share the positives, the negatives, be able to celebrate and relive some of the things that you've done. And, you know, as long as people are willing to listen, you know, tell those stories about what AV was 20 years ago, or what the industry was like starting out and how it's different now. And I have seen a lot of change, and I have seen a lot of progression. And I realize that we also have a lot of room for growth, but that's a good thing. You know, we wouldn't want to be in a place where we didn't have room for growth. So, you know, we're very much, we need to embrace that, and we need to say that we can be better, and that this is something that is going to benefit everybody involved. You know, I'm proud to say that we have a female programmer on our team. We have, you know, more than 25% of our team is female, and we want to continue to invest in more diversity within our team. And I encourage others to do so, because quite honestly, I think it's so much more of an enriching community. I honestly don't like going to events where everybody is like me. And there's such a different dynamic with women and their voices in the industry. I can't speak highly enough for it. And I also feel like we, you know, should do the same for people of different races and colors and so forth, and backgrounds as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree. I wouldn't want to go to an InfoComm full of Dans. I know you said the same thing, Steve, about yourself. You said the same thing about yourself, Brittney. We want diversity of thought, diversity of appearance, diversity of background, diversity of expertise, diversity of passion. So I give kudos to the Avixa Diversity Council, the NSCA DEI Action Council, the Avixa Women's Council, everyone, large and small, in terms of organizations and associations trying to push us in that direction. And I do feel like, you know, having been to InfoComm since 2005, in my case, there's been meaningful progress. It's certainly, you know, as Corey Schaefer would say, not enough, and there has not been enough. But going from maybe 5% non-white men to moving up to, you know, 14% women, it's an improvement. It's not what we want to be, but it's an improvement. Do any of you or each of you have some closing thoughts about InfoComm, about what you're thinking about as we look ahead to InfoComm 2023, or any closing thoughts about the show that we experienced?
So I know Emily talked a little bit about this on Twitter, so I want to give her some space to be able to talk to it. But those new to our industry have got to experience InfoComm. And I know a lot of times those coming to the show are the decision makers. You know, they're usually higher up in the organization, but it's going to be so important, not only for them, but also for our industry to get to know those newcomers into the industry, to allow them to experience that family and that camaraderie that we all talked about.
Absolutely.
Yes. Definitely get more first timers to InfoComm. The investment is definitely worth it. You know, expose them to the technologies, to where the marketing is going, to clients, competitors. You know, it can open your mind, and we got to keep, you know, bringing more people to know the industry as a whole. And I don't think that any training would be as effective as spending a couple of days at InfoComm. So no money would pay the experience I had. And also, you know, keep using social media is the most powerful tool we have now. I believe one of the reasons I was invited to talk to you guys here today was by the discussion on Twitter about, you know, AV newcomers And we got to keep, I would say that we got to keep investing in actions like the AV Tweeps, the AV in the AM. This all brings people together and we can discuss what's happening in the industry and, keep using this in our favor to connect with people and understand about the industry.
Very, very well said. Any closing thoughts from you, Steve?
I think we already start looking forward to the next show after this one ends. So we're excited about what's upcoming for us, because we also play in the residential space as well. So any CEDIA and ISE and InfoComm, these are just staples on our calendar, and I mean there's nothing that would get in the way of us being a part of them. And just the energy that you get is just so inspiring, and I think we're kind of living on that high still, and we need to just make sure that we use that as a catalyst for growth and say this needs to propel us till the next show, but what can we do with all of the great things that we got out of this trade show, so that we can prove to everybody that it was a worthwhile investment. It was something that was a good use of time, and we need to do more of them. And we also need to be supportive of those organizers in the industry who bring us together in this way, because if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have these types of occasions. And so, I'm not going to stop going to events like this. And it's been a long streak. And just from the first one, I knew, like similar to Emily's perspective, that this is the place that I had to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's I think a great note to close on. Now it's time to kind of harness all that energy, harness all those insights, and use them to better our businesses and just serve our industry over the next months ahead, and then on to 2023, InfoComm 2023, ISE, et cetera. Well, thank you so much to this portion of the Control Concepts Brain Trust, Brittney DiCesare, Account Manager, Emily Rocha, Marketing Specialist, Steve Greenblatt, who is, of course, President and CEO, for joining me on the AV Plus podcast. I really appreciate your insights. I really appreciate your perspective and the time investment to be here on AV Plus.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Looking forward to seeing you next week for another edition of AV Plus with more great content just like this. Thank you so much for joining us once again.